Thanks for tuning in to the BB Manga Review. This is going to be a review of chapter 908 of the One Piece manga. And Oda has really outdone himself with these last five chapters. To think that the start to an arc without any of the main crew members will be this exciting is something that Oda deserves so much adulation for. Now, I'm going to dive right into analyzing the chapter. The first topic I'm going to discuss is Mjosgard. We saw him club St. Carlos last chapter, and this chapter he more or less grants members of the surface world royalty the right to protect Shirahoshi, even if it meant using violence against the celestial dragons. I really hope that this isn't another instance where someone who appears to be very compassionate turns back on their word like we saw with Pudding. Thankfully, we already have a backstory that supports the idea that Mjosgard will in fact keep this promise. I'm glad that this development to the plot has already been made because it'll facilitate more progress later on. We already know that Shirahoshi may be a target for the world government. After all, she is the ancient weapon Poseidon. Therefore, when it comes time to protect her, those protecting her will be much less hesitant, knowing that they have Mjosgard's safeguard. This also brings up the question of what will happen to Mjosgard in the future. Obviously, not even his status will be able to protect him from everything. Something I could foresee happening in a future battle is Mjosgard giving up his life to protect Shirahoshi. That way, Mjosgard could act symbolically as a martyr for the cause that Otohime fought and died for. The sacrifice made by Celestial Dragon could reignite the hopes for the fishmen that they will one day be able to live harmoniously on the surface with the humans. And next, we're going to briefly cover this meeting with King Cobra, King Riku, and Admiral Fujitora. I don't think that it's a coincidence that last chapter, and maybe a few chapters ago, that Fujitora was talking about abolishing the Shishibukai, and now he's talking to the two kings who experienced hostile takeovers of their countries by the Shishibukai. It's very likely that Fujitora is asking for Cobra and Riku's help in pushing the world government to abolish the Shishibukai. And I love how many layers to the plot that Oda has created by giving so many different parties different agendas throughout this Reverie arc. But next, we're going to get into one of the biggest shockers of this chapter. Jewelry Bonney has also arrived in Mary Jo, and with her introduction into this arc, all we're left with is even more questions as to who she is. She was able to impersonate Queen Dowager of the Sorbet Kingdom. We also know that Bonnie's fruit only allows her to manipulate her age and what her outward appearance would be if she were that age. So for her to be able to impersonate the queen would mean one of two things. She's either inherited the queen's looks by being a blood descendant, or she has in fact been the queen this whole time in disguise. As of right now, I'm leaning more towards the idea that she's a descendant of the queen for the sole reason that it wouldn't make sense for the ruler of a country to be able to secretly roam the seas as a nefarious pirate even if the two look completely different. However, if it does in fact end up being the case that Bonnie actually is the queen of Sorbet Kingdom, then it actually wouldn't come up as too much of a surprise because Oda actually has shown us something similar when Princess Vivi was sent as a spy for Barak Works as Miss Wednesday. I was reading through Reddit and someone mentioned that the large panel where all of the royalty sit in a circle only have 49 out of the 50 members present. So it is possible that Bonnie is in fact the queen who is missing from the meeting. And we also get introduced to the former king of Sorbet Kingdom, Bartholomew Kuma. I didn't think Oda could make us hate the Celestial Dragons any more than we already did, but watching them abuse Kuma put them even further on an all-time low. Through their connection as royalty of the Sorbet Kingdom, we now realize that Bonnie and Kuma actually have a much closer relationship than we had once thought. This also explains why Bonnie was crying after the war, and it seems pretty clear that one of Bonnie's objectives is to save Kuma. So that begs the question of whether Bonnie is here of her own accord or if she's already colluded with the Revolutionary Army, because as it gets revealed later, the Revolutionary Army already had saving Kuma as one of their goals. Also, Oda never really makes it clear as to how the commanders knew that Kuma was being mistreated. This furthers the possibility that Bonnie is colluding with the Revolutionary Army because it's likely that they either secretly observed Bonnie entering the castle or Bonnie had tipped them in after her successful infiltration. Regardless of which side she's on, it's going to be interesting to see what role Bonnie plays in this arc now that we know that she's successfully infiltrated the castle. Next, we're going to talk about the Nefertari family. The Gorosei reveal in this chapter that the Nefertari family was originally part of the founding 20 members, but chose to live on the surface. I think it's pretty clear that this information is going to be very important for the future. It's possible that the Nefertari family knows a lot more than we assume they know about history and the world government. Does this fact have anything to do with Arabasta Kingdom having Pluto? Could this be the reason why, as we're going to talk about about it more in a little bit, why Vivi is going to be potentially a target for the Gorosei. There's a lot of questions to be asked that we know is that we now that we know this piece of history about the Nefertari family. But next, we're going to talk about this grand cleansing that gets mentioned. At a first read, it really seems like it's going to involve a purge. Usually, when cleansing gets used in an ominous context like that, it involves the notion of killing people who are part of the problem. As of right now, there's very little that's clear about what this cleansing is going to mean, but my best guess is that we're going to learn a bit about the Void Century as a result of this. Cleansing may be more than just cleansing opposition, it could mean cleansing or erasing history, like we saw with the Void Century. So, this again leaves us with a lot of questions. Are we going to see another Buster Call? Just how many people will lose their lives as a consequence of this cleansing? These are all things that we'll just have to wait to find out. But finally, we're going to get to the mammoth reveal of this chapter. There's a man, or to me it seems more like a woman, who sits atop the empty throne, and all five Gorosei kneel and proclaim her name, Im-sama. There's a very high chance that we just got introduced to the strongest character in all of One Piece. Up until now, we had always thought that the Gorosei sat at the top of the world government hierarchy, and now we know that there's potentially a single final boss that Luffy is going to have to overcome to topple the world government. There's not too much that has been revealed about Eam's powers, but here's what we do know. Eam is going to be incredibly strong. If you notice through the final few pages, even though she doesn't say anything, Oda still chooses to give her speech bubbles that are just filled with dots. It's possible that there is an alternative meaning to this, but how I took it is that Eam's aura is so potent that even her silence has a presence. It is likely that Eam knows a lot about the outside world. She knows that Luffy and Blackbeard can be threats to the world government, and also knows that Shirahoshi is an ancient weapon. All of this can be deduced by the fact that these are the three wanted posters that were lying slashed on the floor. It's likely that Eam's haki is going to be unbelievably strong, meaning that she's likely to be able to see far into the future at a great range, and potentially even command the wills of others with Conqueror's haki. This will be able to explain why the Gorosei are so quick to ask Im for guidance. Now, to dig into that a little more, it seems that this light that's going to be extinguished is Vivi, judging by how Vivi was the only picture that Im took up with her up to the throne. Why Vivi would be chosen as a target isn't all too clear. It's possible that Im sees her as a threat because she is technically royalty from one of the original founding members. In One Piece, the bloodline is very important when it comes to claim of power, so it might not even be too much of a stretch to claim that Vivi has a potential chance at grabbing the ultimate throne. Whatever the reason may be, what we do know is we're dying to know what happens next. Oda has just set the stage for what could possibly be the best arc we have yet to see in One Piece.